Jessica and Alex were like two stars meeting in the sky. Their love burned like fire, filling every moment with happiness. They dreamed of starting a family, imagined walks in the park with their children, shared joy and laughter. The night Jessica found out she was expecting twins, she and Alex threw a real party. "Can you believe it? 2 babies at once," exclaimed Jessica, hugging Alex. "I can't believe it. We're going to be parents," he replied, glowing with happiness. When it was time for the delivery, Alex took Jessica to the hospital. The doctors reassured them that everything was going smoothly and there was nothing for the soon-to-be parents to worry about. "Everything will be fine," Alex whispered, squeezing Jessica's hand. "I'm with you, my love." The first baby, a boy they named Kim, was born healthy and strong. But when the second boy, Eric, came into the world, their joy quickly turned to horror. "Your son has a condition. He needs emergency surgery," the doctor said, delivering the terrifying news. "What?" Jessica's eyes were filled with fear. "How is that possible?" "We must act immediately," the doctor added. "Your son has liver failure, and we need a donor. Finding one so quickly is difficult, but your husband is a match in every way. If he agrees, we can proceed with the surgery." Alex, feeling the weight of the situation, spoke with determination. "We'll do whatever it takes. The most important thing is to save him. I agree to be the donor. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he's okay." During the surgery, Jessica waited in the room with her first baby, agonizing in anticipation. Time stretched slowly, and each minute seemed like an eternity. When the doctor came out of the operating room, his face was stony. "I'm sorry," he began, and Jessica felt her world crumble. "We did everything we could, but your husband—" "What's wrong with him?" she screamed. "He died. Saving your son." His heart stopped during surgery. The words pierced her heart like a sharp knife. Jessica was in shock. She couldn't believe it. "How is this possible?" she whispered. He couldn't have left me." "Your son is fine," the doctor continued. "You'll be able to see him soon." "He killed my husband," Jessica whispered, her voice cold and distant. "I don't want to see him. Ever." She couldn't believe what had happened. It felt like she had lost not only the love of her life, but also a part of herself. Her world plunged into a dark abyss of hatred and grief. To her, it seemed like Eric had taken her beloved husband away. "You don't deserve my love," she whispered when the nurse brought her newborn son into the room. A wave of physical pain washed over her as she looked at him. It was unbearable to even hold him in her arms. With grief weighing on her soul and hatred filling her heart, Jessica didn't want to take Eric home from the hospital. Relatives and friends tried to convince her, assuring her that Alex's death was a tragic accident. But even their words couldn't drown the deep chasm of pain she had fallen into. In the end, under the pressure of those around her, she reluctantly took her younger son home. Eric grew up in an atmosphere of hatred, while Kim, the firstborn and Jessica's favorite, basked in her care and attention. Eric was left in the shadows. Jessica treated Eric with coldness and cruelty, never letting him forget her disdain. Meanwhile, Kim, the elder son, was adored and spoiled. He looked so much like her late husband, a constant reminder of the love she had lost. Eric knew exactly why his mother didn't love him. She reminded him constantly. "You took Alex away from me. You killed your father," she whispered, her voice sharp and cold like a blade. He felt like an outsider, rejected not only by his family but by the world at large. Lacking support, he often sought solace in books, which offered him an escape from his unbearable reality. Through their pages he could find adventure and hope, even if only for a little while. With each passing day, Eric felt his loneliness growing. "Mama, why are you like that with him?" Kim once asked their mother, genuine concern in his voice. "You wouldn't understand," Jessica replied, her voice icy. "But believe me, he doesn't deserve love." Despair swelled within Eric's heart. Every evening as he closed his eyes, the words echoed in his mind. "I wish I had died instead of my father." 18 years had passed since that fateful night when Jessica lost Alex. Each day was a torment for her, and her hatred for Eric became increasingly obsessive. She couldn't allow herself to forget who he was to her, a constant reminder of what had been taken from her. The pain of her loss was ever present, and every glance at Eric felt like a stab to her heart, fueling her resentment and deepening the void in her soul. Meanwhile, Kim had become the favorite of his college. His charming smile and confidence attracted the attention of both peers and professors. He looked just like a replica of his father, slim, cheerful, with eyes brimming with hope and optimism. Wherever he went, he radiated positivity, and people were naturally drawn to his warmth and charisma. For Kim, life seemed to unfold effortlessly, filled with opportunities and friendships that only reinforced his mother's love and admiration. Eric, on the other hand, avoided socializing. He spent his days cooped up in his room, surrounded by books and food. Struggling with his weight made him feel even more awkward and isolated, as if the walls he had built around himself were as thick as his insecurities. Each bite of food was a temporary escape from the pain that haunted him, but it also deepened his sense of loneliness. The world outside the door seemed distant and unfriendly, a harsh reminder of the love and acceptance that eluded him. One day, while returning from college, Eric stumbled upon a group of guys discussing an upcoming party. He clutched his book to his chest, trying to blend into the background and avoid attention. Suddenly, one of them, Kelvin, approached him with a mocking grin. "Hey, fatty, aren't you going to the party? Or are you afraid no girl will look your way?" Laughter erupted among the group, and Eric felt a rush of heat flooding his cheeks. Humiliation engulfed him, tightening its grip around his heart. He turned sharply and walked home at a brisk pace, determined not to look back or hear any more of their taunts. Each step felt heavier, weighed down by the echoes of their laughter, reminding him of his isolation and the pain he constantly tried to escape. 3 days later, returning from college, Eric was confronted by a sobbing girl standing at their front door. It was Tina, a classmate of both his and Kim's. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she recounted the horrifying events of that night. "Eric? You have to believe me," she cried, her voice shaking with fear and agony. "Kim, he attacked me at the party." Eric froze in place, his heart pounding frantically as he tried to comprehend her words. He felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. How could his brother, the golden boy their mother and everyone else adored, commit such a heinous act? "Are you sure?" he asked in a barely audible whisper, searching her eyes for certainty but finding only pain. "Yes, I tried to fight him off, but he wouldn't stop," Tina sobbed, her body shaking. Eric's thoughts raced as the full weight of her revelations reached him. Memories of his brother's charm and confidence shattered at the reality of her words. Confusion overwhelmed him, and anger began to rise within him. "Why didn't you tell someone sooner?" he asked, trying to hide his growing panic. "I was scared, Eric. I thought no one would believe me," she replied, and her voice cracked under the weight of fear. Eric felt his heart pounding in his chest. He could barely realize that he felt betrayed. How could Kim do this to a human being? How could he betray not only Tina, but their family? The image of his brother, who had once been a beacon of light in his life, began to crumble, leaving only a void filled with doubt and anger. "Let's go talk to Mom," he said suddenly, his resolve growing firmer. "We can't let this go unpunished." As they entered the house, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that everything in his life was about to change forever. Jessica, upon hearing the accusations against Kim, was consumed by rage. The very idea that her beloved son could commit such an atrocity was inconceivable to her. Panic gripped her heart as she thought of how to protect Kim. "No, it can't be true," she reasoned internally. "It must have been a mistake. Maybe it was Eric. They look so much alike. The only difference is Eric is a bit heavier. Tina must have confused them." Driven by her protective instincts, Jessica confronted Tina with a fierce determination. "You've made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "It wasn't Kim who hurt you. It was Eric. He's always been the odd one out, and you just got confused in the heat of the moment." Tina looked taken aback, uncertainty flickering across her tear-stained face. But I'm sure it was Kim, I remember." "No," Jessica interrupted, her voice rising. "You can't possibly be sure. Think about it. Eric is a bit bigger, and he could easily be mistaken for Kim. You need to understand that this is a serious accusation." Tina hesitated, her resolve weakening as she saw the ferocity in Jessica's eyes. I don't know," she stammered. "Maybe you're right, it was chaotic at the party." Seizing the moment, Jessica leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You can make this right. Just write a statement saying it was Eric. It'll save my son's life, and you won't have to deal with the repercussions of this mistake." With Jessica's insistence ringing in her ears, Tina felt overwhelmed. The weight of her trauma mixed with the pressure from Jessica, making it hard to think clearly. "Okay," she finally agreed, her voice trembling. "I'll do it. I'll write the statement." As Jessica watched her, A sinister satisfaction began to bloom in her chest. She had twisted the narrative to protect Kim, ensuring that her perfect image of him remained intact. The anger she felt toward Eric deepened, transforming her grief into a renewed sense of purpose, one that now revolved around keeping her family together at any cost, even if it meant sacrificing the truth. Eric stared in horror at his mother and brother, his mind struggling to comprehend the betrayal unfolding before him. The weight of their accusations hung heavily in the air, suffocating him. "They've set me up," he thought, the realization hitting him like a thunderbolt. This was the last straw. His heart raced as he bolted out of the house, the world outside fading into a blur. Each step felt heavy, like he was carrying the weight of 1,000 stones. "It all makes sense now," he mused bitterly. "The murderer should be behind bars. I killed my father. This is my punishment." He trudged along, eyes cast downward, oblivious to the world around him. The vibrant colors of the street faded into dull shades of gray, and the sounds of laughter and life became mere background noise. In his daze, he failed to notice the traffic signal change from green to red. In that moment, Eric felt a jolt, a force he couldn't comprehend. It was as if the world had shifted and he was suddenly cast into an alternate reality. He lay on the ground, disoriented, the sounds of the bustling street fading into an eerie silence. As he slowly lifted his head, a sharp pain radiated through his body, but his focus narrowed on a figure emerging from the vehicle. A girl, her face pale and eyes wide with terror, stumbled out of the car. She was breathing heavily, her hands shaking as she rushed toward him. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she cried, her voice trembling. Eric blinked, still trying to grasp the situation. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. He had been hit by a car. "You were running a red light. But I don't see how I didn't see you. I was just distracted for a second. I'm fine, don't worry, but I'd rather you hit me to death." "What are you talking about?" The girl looked at him with wide-open eyes. She was perceptive and immediately realized that something was wrong with this strange, lost young man. She helped him to his feet and offered to take him to the hospital. Eric shook his head, insisting that he didn't feel it was necessary. Apart from a few bruises, it was nothing serious. "I'm Aina." The girl introduced herself, extending her hand. "If you don't want to go to the hospital, why don't we have some tea? You can tell me why you were hoping to be hit by a car." Eric hesitated for a moment, surprised by her directness. He saw sincerity in her eyes, and despite his initial instinct to retreat into his shell, he wanted to open up to her. "It's complicated," he replied, uncertainty still in his voice. "Complicated usually means it's worth talking about," Aina said, her smile warm and encouraging. "Come on, I promise I'm a good listener." "My name is Eric," he said, extending his hand to the girl. "Aina, you will be the first person to whom I will tell my sad story, full of hopelessness and despair." They sat down in a small cafe and Eric began to speak. Aina listened silently and attentively. "How can you blame a newborn for the death of their father?" she said, her eyes filled with genuine fire. "You're not to blame. Do you understand that? I've always believed that I was my father's killer. How could I not believe my mother? Eric said quietly. Your relatives are definitely not a gift. How shameless of them to try to pin your brother's crime on you. But you know what? I will help you, she said enthusiastically after a brief pause. How? It's useless, and I'll end up behind bars anyway, Eric said sadly, looking at Aina. Okay, you clearly lack optimism, but that's understandable. I'm a budding lawyer. I may not have much experience yet, but I've always gotten straight A's, and I really want to help you. I will defend you in court. Eric couldn't believe what he was hearing. No one had ever helped him before. No one had ever offered him support. Everyone had always ignored him, and over time he had learned to ignore himself as well. But Aina, she stirred something within him, and it was hope. Her words marked the first sign of care he had ever felt. The trial became a true test for Eric. As he entered the courtroom, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. His legs trembled with fear and uncertainty. But Aina was by his side, her support giving him strength. She walked confidently next to him, ready to defend him in any situation. Each time she cast a glance his way, Eric felt that he was not alone. The courtroom was filled with tension. Eric sat in the defendant's chair, his face reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. Jessica, his mother, sat behind him, her eyes glinting with hatred. The proceedings began, and the first witnesses started to testify. Tina, with tears in her eyes, recounted her anguish. Aina, sitting beside Eric, held his hand, imparting her confidence to him. During the trial, it was revealed that Tina had a friend who confirmed seeing Kim and Tina leave together for a room on the night of the incident. This information was crucial. It could change everything. Aina decided to call the friend as a witness so she could tell the truth. With each new word spoken in court, Eric felt an increase in confidence. He sensed that justice was on his side. The atmosphere shifted, and for the first time, hope began to flicker in his heart. When it was time for Aina to speak, she presented the evidence she had gathered during her research. She compiled testimonies and facts indicating that Kim was indeed at the party that night and that several witnesses had seen Tina with him. No one had seen Eric at the party, and despite them being identical twins, distinguishing between them was not difficult at all. Aina's voice was steady as she laid out the case, each point crafted to dismantle the false narrative that had been imposed on Eric. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. With each of Aina's words, Eric felt the invisible chains that had bound him begin to break, and his soul filled with hope. Finally, Aina turned to the judge, requesting that the charges against Eric be dismissed and that the case against Kim be investigated instead. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom as everyone's attention fixed on the judge, waiting for the verdict. In that moment, Tina couldn't hold it together any longer. She burst into tears and, amidst her sobs, confessed that it was actually Kim who had assaulted her, but that he and his mother had pressured her into accusing Eric. The words hung in the air, shocking everyone present. Eric's heart raced as he absorbed this revelation. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, and all eyes turned to Kim, whose expression shifted from arrogance to sheer panic. When the judge announced the verdict, finding Eric not guilty, he hugged Aina tightly. It was the most sincere display of affection he had ever felt. In that moment, their bond grew stronger, and Eric realized that he finally had someone willing to support him. Pulling away from the embrace, he looked into Aina's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Aina smiled softly, brushing a tear off her cheek. "You deserve freedom and happiness." With a newfound sense of hope, Eric was ready to face any hardship, knowing he was no longer alone. However, Jessica could not accept the verdict. Her hatred for her younger son only deepened. She glared at Eric, her eyes filled with venom, and spat. "First, you took my husband from me, and now you've taken my son. I hate you." Eric didn't respond. He looked sadly at his mother and realized for the first time that she would never love him. No matter how hard he tried, she would always see him as the one who ruined her life. And there was nothing he could do about it. Aina approached him, took his hand, and quietly said, "Let's get out of here. There's nothing left for us here. It's all over." Soon their bond strengthened. Aina became a part of his life, and every moment spent with her felt like a breath of fresh air. They spent their evenings reading books, sharing dreams, and discussing plans for the future. Eric felt alive. He had finally found purpose. One evening, sitting on a bench in the park, Aina unexpectedly spoke about her desire to create a foundation to support victims of violence. "I want everyone to have the opportunity to protect themselves," she said, looking him in the eyes. "We need to do something to help those who are suffering." Eric looked at her with admiration. Her passion inspired him. He remembered his brother, how he himself had tried to cope with hatred and despair. "I can help," he said confidently. "I will write articles, telling the stories of people who have faced similar situations. This will be our contribution." Aina smiled, and there was a fire in her eyes. They began to plan. Together, they devised a strategy, created a website, and started publishing content. Their work garnered attention, and soon people began to talk about them. But not everything was so simple. Jessica, upon learning about their activities, became even angrier. She couldn't accept that her son had become famous, that he had taken such a step while her life was completely shattered. One day, she came to their office, unable to contain her rage. "Do you think you can change the world?" she shouted, looking at him with hatred. "You are a worthless piece of trash. You don't deserve this girl or her support." Eric felt a wave of fear wash over him, but he was no longer going to stay silent. "I'm not going to hide behind my fears anymore, Mom," he said, looking her straight in the eyes. "I am who I am. I'm not a murderer. I'm not responsible for what happened to Dad. And I'm not to blame for what happened to Kim. I never wished harm on anyone. You made me a monster." After that incident, his relationship with Jessica only worsened. She became increasingly unstable, sinking deeper into her own world of hatred and bitterness. Soon, Jessica ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Eric felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He understood that he was finally free. With each passing day, he and Aina grew closer to each other. They worked tirelessly, organizing events and attracting sponsors for their foundation. Eric began writing his stories, pouring into them all the pain and suffering he had endured. His works were filled with hope, and soon they gained popularity. At one of the meetings, Aina, excited, turned to him. "Eric, we have the opportunity to hold a charity concert. We need people to support our initiative," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "That's a great idea," Eric replied. "We can attract a lot of people and spread the word about our foundation." The preparation for the concert turned into a real whirlwind of emotions. Eric and Aina worked day and night, raising funds and communicating with musicians and volunteers. They became a true team, and their mutual support inspired both of them. Finally, the day of the concert arrived. The hall was filled with people. Eric felt a growing excitement. He stepped onto the stage, and when he looked at the audience, he saw familiar faces. Friends, acquaintances, people who had gone through similar situations. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice trembling. "We are here to support those who are suffering, to show that we are not alone. We can all change the world if we stand together." The hall erupted with applause, and in that moment Eric realized that his words mattered. He had not only freed himself from the burdens of the past, but had also become a voice for those in need of support. The concert was a tremendous success. The funds raised allowed them to launch new projects for the foundation, and Eric and Aina were able to implement their ideas. They created a space where people could talk about their problems and receive support. Eric and Aina became symbols of hope, and their bond only grew stronger. One day, after a long day of work, they sat on the roof, gazing at the starry sky. "I can't believe how far we've come," Aina said, looking at him with a smile. "You have become a true inspiration for many." "And so have you," Eric replied, squeezing her hand. "We did this together." In that moment, he realized that life isn't always easy, but with love and support, it's possible to overcome any obstacles. Now they were not just partners, but true allies. Thus, Eric was building his new life step by step, filled with love and meaning. He was no longer an outcast. Now he had become a symbol of hope, and his heart was filled with light. Together with Aina, he continued to move forward, discovering new horizons and inspiring others. Their journey was just beginning, and ahead of them lay countless opportunities that they were ready to face with open hearts. May your life be full of joy and limitless possibilities. Thanks for watching. Be sure to share your opinion, and don't forget to write a comment. Subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.